proof makes us squirm because, frankly, our stories are accosted by metrics that are bullies. You know what I mean. Let me tell you a story about a story. Let's say you cover government in California. You've worked hard on building your sources, understanding what works in government and what doesn't. And you see on the governor's calendar, Jerry's calendar, that's what I like to call him, that he's meeting with the LA County Board of Supervisors in a closed-door session. You check the supervisor website. Yeah, that meeting is there, and it says it's closed door. And the topic, they say, okay, it's this exciting thing called criminal justice realignment. Controversial plan, yes, to shift some inmates from state prisons to county jails. You go, what? Not about the criminal justice realignment thing. I mean, that's the kind of story that just sort of grinds on and on and on and on and on kind of thing. No, it really bothers you, it really piques you, it really makes you stop and say, what about something that's an agenda item on a county supervisor's website? Is that there's this little thing in California called the Brown Act. It says it's illegal for public officials to have closed-door sessions unless it's a public emergency. Now, we are in California. We do have earthquakes. And so it is possible that the governor and the Board of Supervisors are anticipating a major earthquake to be on Tuesday from 10 to 11 a.m. So while they're waiting for it, they might as well get together and have this casual conversation about criminal justice realignment. Yeah, right. So you show up, and you see that closed door, and you see this bailiff with a gun, and you reach for that door handle to go in, and as you see the hand go toward on the gun, so you back off. And what do? You write a story. Not just about this closed-door meeting, but about how this is just the latest in a long line of county supervisors violating public meeting and public records laws that are essential to government access and transparency, laws that are essential to democracy. So you write your story, and it's a good one. It points out something that people who need to know this wouldn't normally know. The next day, you go into your office, you open your email like you always do, and there it is. The daily page view report. Miley Cyrus, #1, 3 million page views. What did she do? It doesn't matter. She's #1. Football, a little behind at 2.5 million. What football? It doesn't matter, except at USC, of course. Scroll, number 4,477, your incredible county supervisor's closed-door meeting story. 300 page views. This happens to you all the time. What do? First thing you think is, whatever. But that's not it, is it? You are frustrated. Your story, the one that's a poster child for the role of the fourth estate in democracy, reduced to page views? The thing is, your story is a child. You work on it for 9 months sometimes. You give birth to it. If you're working on it for 2 years, you're an elephant. Once you post a story, any story, it's not the end. It's the beginning of the life of your story, Or at the very least, it's another chapter. Every child needs nurturing. Every parent needs and wants more information about their child other than just say how much the child weighs. So, yeah, okay. You have the weight. You have the fact that you have the story and you have page views. But think about what you really know about your story. You're thinking, one of those page views probably came from the district attorney. This district attorney, who you know investigated this violation of the Brown Act and then cited the supervisors for violating the law, which you wrote a story about. And then you worked with your data team to put together a searchable database and a timeline of county supervisor open meeting and public records violations. And then 3 months later, a public advocacy group sued the supervisors and won back their legal fees, which you wrote a story about. The DA notches another win. The Public Advocacy Board makes this one of the highlights of their annual report. And you have your 300-page views. You need to tell the complete story of your story. Yes, the 300-page views for that first story. But what about the page views for the DA's actions, the Public Advocacy Board, the additional traffic to these stories, in addition to a bit more to your additional story because you've hooked them all together? And don't forget about the searches on that database of the supervisor violations. And, oh yeah, you also wrote an explainer on the Brown Act. You have to treat the story of your story just like any other story that you do. You have to research it, you have to get the data, you have to cultivate sources, the audience analysts. You have to prove it. Prove that you made a difference. Prove that you wrote a story that mattered. Yes, it takes time. And yes, there are so many metrics, so little time. But I'm going to give you 3 numbers that will help you put it all together. 3 numbers that will help you tell the complete story of your story. Whether it's a Watergate level story that brings down a president, or maybe just helps people get the information they need that will improve their lives. So, 3 numbers. What are they? No suspense here. The numbers are 1, 2, and 15. 15. So, number 1. Let's go back to that story about the county supervisors. 300 page views, rank number 4,447. It only takes one person to make a difference. And for your story, it was the district attorney. A real person, not a page view. One person, one page view. It doesn't matter if your story had 1 million page views. It doesn't even matter to Miley how many page views she gets. It doesn't matter if your story has all these page views if the story didn't impact someone, if the story didn't go to the people to whom it mattered the most. Yes, your story had 300 page views, but one came from the district attorney. And I bet the rest of the 299 page views came from the governor, the public advocacy group, influencers, people who really cared. So people, not page views. The complete story of your story has to include the people behind the page views. It has to include the people behind the tweets and the retweets, behind the comments on the story and on your Facebook page. Yes, look at the number of page views, tweets, followers, comments, likes, and so on. But dig deeper. You know how to do this research. You know how to get proof. And if you know how to get the word out, then you can reach the right people. And you know how to do that too. You know how to get your story to the people who it's going to matter the most. So that's the first, then, of the numbers. 1, look at the person behind the page view, that one person. Look at each an individual. Really think about who your story is really affecting. Second number, again, no surprises. Second number is 2. What does 2 mean? 2 is to look at the metrics that indicate that that one person behind a page view took that second click. Look at the number of page views to the interactive database of violations, and also how many of those page views actually ended up with that person searching the database. A search, whether it's in a database or an internal search engine, really gives you incredibly valuable keyword information on what people are really interested in, on what topics they were interested in, on what topics you should be covering. It gives you really information about what impact you are actually having to them, what impact, how important the story was to them, I think. Look at these metrics that really show that the person behind the page view actually read or otherwise engaged in the story. Scroll rate. Did they get to the page and did they go down 25% of the page, half of the page, or the entire story? Videos. Did they even start the video? Did they go halfway? Did they click on a photo or a chart or a graphic that was below the scroll line? Were they clicking on something that tells you that they were actually there and that they actually saw the story? Did they do something that really indicated that they had an increase in their awareness and their knowledge and their understanding and how it really affected their lives? There are all kinds of metrics built into your site that will tell you what people did and how that story really made a difference. Bounce rate. Bounce rate is one of those annoying negative metrics. You do not want to high bounce rate. Bounce is when someone goes to your site, looks at your page, and immediately leaves. In other words, the person behind that one page views did not take a second click. They did not click on that link in your story, on your explainer, on the database, on the video. In the words of the immortal Avinash Kaushik, who is my sort of personal analytics guru, bounce rate is I came, I saw, I puked. Again, I wish I coined it, but it does come from someone who is the analytics guru. The bar is not high here. All it takes is one click, one lousy second click to reduce your bounce rate. Looking at these second clicks means looking at the metrics about how you are engaging people over time. These are not metrics of the moment. These are the metrics that show you the complete story of your story. Your story's life isn't over one day, or even 2 days, or 2 weeks, maybe not even 2 years. I've seen some story page counts that stop after 2 weeks. This is okay for Miley Cyrus, and it's pretty good for football, but not for government stories, and not for many of the stories that really matter, that really reflect the kind of work that we do. Stories take time to have an impact, to make a difference. The proof that you've done a story that matters, that indicate that the people behind the page views took those second clicks, that's where the proof is. So that was number 2. The third number, 15. Before I get to 15 and really explain what I mean by 15, let me give you another number, 99. 99% of your time should be spent on journalism, on researching, reporting, developing sources, analyzing data, writing, shooting, editing, coding, engaging on social media, everything that is essential to journalism today. So I'm asking you now to add audience analytics to your definition of what is essential to journalism. Analytics. Does this mean more work? Yes. Does it require math? Yes. Okay. Does it take more time? Yes. All right, I know I had you on the 99% spent on journalism, and now I've lost you, right? I've mentioned the A word. I've mentioned the M word, metrics. I think. Stay with me, please. So let's get to the 15. What I'm asking you to do is to just spend 15 minutes a day doing what it takes to tell the complete story of your story. To put emails from people and notes about the impact that you've had in a folder or a system like NewsLinks, which is a newsroom metrics tool developed by Michael Keller and Brian Abelson while they were on a fellowship program at the Columbia Tau Center. Or use something like the Center for Investigative Reporting's Impact Tracker. Something that gives you a place where you're gathering all of the information that you need to tell the story of your story. 15 minutes a day to learn about second-click audience metrics from the Media Impact Project or from newsroom audience analysts, such as those at the New York Times, at Gannett, and the Financial Times. 15 minutes a day to gather the proof that your stories matter. I think I know what you're thinking. You already work 40, 50, 60, anybody in the 70, 80 range? Yes. O&A is actually a vacation, right? But you remember, your story is a child that has a long life. It needs nurturing, it needs direction, it needs discipline. And isn't it worth 15 minutes a day just to feel better when you see that daily page views report? Just 15 minutes at the end of the day. No, make that the beginning of the day. Make that when you open up that daily page view report. That's the time when you fight that bully with proof that your story matters. There's lots of help for you here at O&A. You do not have to fight this fight alone. The Media Impact Project, we've got our shingle out in the newsroom in the Midway. We've got a bevy of metrics experts doing office hours during the entire 3 days. We have guides on basic metrics, mobile metrics, YouTube, nonprofit organizations. We're hosting an open house on Saturday to talk about NewsLinks and everything that you can do with it. We also have Lindsay Green-Barber from the Center for Investigative Reporting talking about the Impact Tracker at our booth, Jessica Clark talking about media funders and what they're looking at. Here at O&A, there's a session on audience engagement with Greg Emerson and Carlo Zaloni and Alexander Smith, editors from Newsday, Wall Street Journal, and Fort Collins, Coloradoan. You can find Michael Keller, the co-developer of Newslinks, at our Saturday open house. He's also speaking with Caitlin Petra of the Yale Law School this afternoon on moving the needle, measuring that movement with both qualitative and quantitative information. Tomorrow, there's a whole slate of speakers from the audience development track that will be at table talks on a variety of topics. You can talk one-on-one about your story. And of course, how can you resist a talk titled, Find the Metrics That Matter for Your Newsroom? With Anjanette Delgado and Rob Gates, both audience analysts in the newsroom at Gannett in Westchester and at Louisville. That's Saturday morning. I just this morning heard some great stuff from them. They're really helping the newsroom on how to really interpret mobile metrics, what this really means for all of the stories. How do you really look at those metrics and see how your stories are making a difference to people where the people are, which of course is on their mobile devices. So these are the kinds of things that the data is out there. And yes, everyone needs help really understanding it and how to apply it to each of their stories. And of course, don't forget about Tony Hale and Chartbeat. Chartbeat is all over here at ONA. I'm so happy to see that. Tony's got a session there called Meet a Brit. Now that sounds fun, and I don't know anybody better than Tony who knows how to make analytics and metrics fun. So you are not alone in this. Journalists, you can do this. You can spend 15 minutes a day on metrics, on analytics, on math, to tell the complete story of your story. And you editors, you site managers, you media funders outside of the room, unless anyone have come in, I'd like to ask you to spend 15 minutes a day not asking about page views. I'd like to ask you to spend 15 minutes a day asking for the complete story of the story. So here's that complete story of your story again. This time using 1, 2, and 15. You're a government reporter. You write a story. You write a story instead of getting shot to getting into an illegal closed session meeting. And your story gets 300 page views. But that's not the end of the story of your story. There's one person behind one of the page views. And that one person was the district attorney who investigated and reprimanded the supervisors. Another person was someone from the public advocacy group who sued the soups and won, which, together with the DA action, may prevent them from doing it ever again. Or it may prevent them from doing it regularly, that way. 2, over the next year, you have the metrics to show that the people behind the page views took those second clicks on the DA story, on the lawsuit, on the timeline of county supervisor violations, on the explainer for the Brown Act. You have an email from a high school teacher asking you to come speak to her class about the role of open meetings in a democracy. The complete story of your story took work. It took at least 15 minutes a day to gather the information and pull it all together. It took time, it took work, and sometimes you struggled with understanding what all of these metrics really meant, if anything. All of this information. It took, in other words, it took no more and no less than any other story that you did. But you did it. You have the complete story of your story And it's a great story. It is proof that you made a difference. So that's what I have. I'm happy to take any questions, but actually more, I'm happy to hear about any of the complete stories of your stories, perhaps stories that you haven't told yet, perhaps stories that you weren't able to tell yet. So you're welcome to share them here. Thank you.
Is this working? Yeah? Okay. So I need to ramble for a minute, and then I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
I spent 15 years as a journalist, or in the newsroom as a reporter, right? And so I've just taken a job at my organization on the audience side, so like on the dark side, pushing page views to try to, save our business. And I've had a lot of aha moments in the last 3 months when I've been kind of doing this work. And I wanted to push back on your scenario in a cynical way, which is not surprising since I'm a journalist. But, it's kind of struck me that page views can be important and relevant in some way because, number one, like it or not, our business model is built around page views, and we need them to keep making money and running. And number two, politicians, the district attorney might read that story. They might be one of the page views, one of the clicks, but they're politicians, right? So they don't care if only 299 other people have read the story. They care about the stories that 20,000 other people have read, and suddenly they have this call to action because they're seeing it on social and it's blowing up. So it strikes me that page views could be relevant in that way also. And my question is, though, as in my heart, I obviously believe what you're saying, and that we can't boil everything down to page views and to make them quantifiable because we lose our mission. As an organization, and I just want to know, what conversations would you suggest that newsrooms be having? What kind of guiding lights do you think that people should be coming back to related to metrics, so that we don't trend too far in the wrong direction of saying, oh my gosh, we have all these data and we have all these page views, but we can't go chasing Miley Cyrus in football all the time, too. So, thanks.
Right, yeah. Yes, let's address the business model. Let's address the difference between advertising metrics and audience metrics. Absolutely, we need page views to sell advertising. That's just how it works. But we are in journalism, and unlike any other business, there is a line, there is a separation between the business side and the newsroom side. And it crosses at a point, and the way that I see it crosses is that the newsroom is responsible for building that audience. And so what audience analysts do, and I saw this at the meeting of Gannett audience analysts this morning, all we did was talk about people and whether or not they got to the story. This is a long-term strategy, and eventually it's up to us as an entire news organization to figure out how we use our audiences, the audiences that we've cultivated, the audience that we know, the audiences that we are targeting. What's the business around that audience? What's the business model? How do we make money from that? Believe me, if I knew the answer, I would tell everybody. But we're all figuring a lot of things out, and we're all going in different directions. We're all trying different things, and some of them aren't going to work. And this one about how do we reconcile the fact that we make money off page views when they don't really tell the complete story of our story, it's difficult. And we're making headway, and some people think that it's just too little too late, and I hope it's not, I think. So in the meantime, I think the best approach, what's the shining light, is to first really understand all this information and really understand how it means to you as a journalist for every particular story. And guess what? Some stories aren't going to matter, and some stories are going to have different purposes where, yeah, page views are important, but again, let's put all this information, like all information we get for any story, into context. Let's use the information for what it is useful for, but not have it be the end all. What's different in our business right now is that there's no longer one single metric of success. We used to have this nice, convenient thing called Nielsen ratings. ABC, Magazine Publishers Association. It was easy, it was convenient. We didn't have to do anything. All we had to do was pay this third party to shove some numbers at us, and then the advertising department then sold those to the advertisers. The newsroom had no role in even having to understand that, other than that if you wanted to brag on what size market you were in. And for many newspaper reporters, that's how you gauge some of your sign of success, is what size circulation you worked at. Again, those are advertiser metrics. They never spoke to the audience that was reading a particular story. They're mass media metrics. So we have all this incredible information before that we never had before about our audiences, on what they really want, how it really affects them. We can really combine the best of qualitative and quantitative information, attitudinal and behavioral information, to get a full picture of our audience and to do what it can. But it does take a lot of work, and it's easy to say, let's just look at page views, because it is an easy number to get, it's an easy number to understand. But it's just not the complete story. So I know that sounds sort of vague, and I can, as many people know, I can spend hours talking about what metrics you can use, and I'd be happy to over these next 3 days. It takes work to really sort of put this all together, but it's worth it. You know, I really do think that it's essential to really understanding it and actually it is as much as the future of journalism as digital is.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex Remington. I'm a product manager at the Washington Post, and I wanted to ask your thoughts on quality metrics, if it is possible either to create them or if it is possible to impute a quality metric as a sort of an index of other types of measures that we already have. It's often said that what you measure is what you do. The numbers that you focus on most are the numbers that you, even unconsciously, will try to increase. And that being the case, I wanted to ask what you think about whether it is possible to measure quality.
You mean quality of the story?
Yeah.
Again, it comes down to definition. Everything in metrics is about defining what the desired outcomes are, defining what success is. And I think I start out with the quality of interaction. I'm going to cheat a little bit. The quality of the interaction often indicates the quality of the story. Was the story complete? You know, did people go to different parts of it? Did they read it? You know, from watching a TV show or a news show, you know what a hook is, kind of thing. If you haven't done your job in both the fact gathering as well as in the craft of the story, then metrics around second clicks and metrics around the engagement thing are one indication of whether or not that story worked or not. And if you know, it's all again part of that bundle of metrics that come out that are relatively obvious if you really have defined what the outcome that you want. Is the outcome awareness? Is the outcome change in knowledge? Are you asking people to take a different action based on what you're reading the story? And there are metrics around that, through not just through behavioral metrics, but also through attitudinal surveys and things like that to really test that. So it is a difficult question to ask, and there's a lot of inference. There's a lot of implicit things that you can get out of the information. But I think it is one to be asked about, how does the quality of the story affect the impact of it? Because sometimes you write a story and it has no impact by all these incredible measures that we have kind of thing. Maybe it just wasn't very good. So I think it's really gathering and really sort of trying to get the full picture and recognizing there's a lot of gray in this area, and also recognizing that sometimes you don't measure, you just go with your gut. You put the outcome that you want, you put the audience first, and there are some things in journalism that you don't measure, and that's okay. We don't have to measure everything. I think metrics should be a tool, they should not be a weapon. So we have been doing some work at the Media Impact Project to try to get at this issue of the quality of the content. I think we did an experiment with developing a rubric for solutions journalism, because one of the questions was around, does solutions journalism create more audience engagement than a story that does not have solutions journalism, does not really highlight the solution to a story as opposed to negative things and what have you. So we've done some experimentation about this rubric, saying, well, if we could identify sort of whether or not a story was solutions or not, then we can then connect the metrics with it, and then using all the engagement metrics and like that, then sort of see whether or not the level of solutions journalism affected those audience engagement metrics. We've been thinking about doing a similar type of rubric for investigative reporting. Not sure if that kind of sort of almost mechanical rating of whether or not something is or this, did it have a lead, did it have a nut graph, did it cover both sides, did it have a balance, did it have that, whatever. I'm not, sort of one of the lessons we learned from the rubric is it takes a lot of work to have that kind of quality assessment, I think. And how much can you boil down to this objective assessment of quality versus a purely subjective one? So we're still working at that, but I do believe definitely the hypothesis is the quality of the story absolutely affects the engagement or the value and the impact and whether or not the story really did have impact.
If you are an editor, you don't have only one story to care about. You have dozens of stories. How do you choose your favorite child?
How do you choose your favorite child? We're always going to have favorite children. Oh, maybe not. Maybe that's not a good thing to say. It's the one that matters the most. It's really thinking about what you're trying to do with the story, who you want to reach. And sometimes, as you know, a story just catches you, and this is the one that matters. So it's, again, we're not talking about, I certainly wouldn't say that to gather these metrics and to only do the ones that have the best engagement metrics or what have you kind of thing. That's something we're still working in a world where metrics, I'm hoping that people are seeing that metrics are tools to see that if it is your favorite child that isn't doing well, that these metrics can give you the information to help it, to nurture it, and to discipline it. And, so metrics are a tool. They're not something to help you treat one child better than another, unless your editor asks you, I guess. Yeah, hi.
Hi, Tom Rosensteel from the American Press Institute. This is going to sound a little bit like a commercial, but it's not intended as that. So we have a program called Metrics for News that we've developed with publishers. We've got about 55 different publications that use this. So there's about 130,000 stories in the data set now. The concept behind it is that the metrics that everybody uses aren't useful for journalism. Page views, even time on site, they tell you whether a piece of content is successful, but they don't really tell you why. So we have a coding scheme that we work with publishers. They can customize it. and they meta tag their stories for their journalistic characteristics. What job is the story doing for a reader? How much effort went into it? Whose idea was the story? Topic is done not in a taxonomy level where it could be 9 or 15 different topics, but 2 or 3. Basically, it's the concepts that editors already have in their heads about their stories. It takes an editor about 30 seconds to tag a story, so it adds about 5 minutes of time. They're able to see after, and this data is useful not after a week, but after several months. They're able to see what inside their education coverage works. They're able to compare watchdog coverage across topics. They're even able to begin to predict how should an enterprise story, how should an investigative story do. This notion also of being able to compare like things to like things. So you can see, okay, education coverage does about this well, so this story does a little bit better than that or a lot better than that, rather than being in the other dimension of this is we take all their analytics in the app that flow into our app, and we reduce the number of numbers they have by creating an index. So if they want to have 40 analytics in this, it's a blend, and they have to decide what value. How much do they value page views over time, local over out of market, et cetera, et cetera. The point of it really in the end is 2 ideas. One is your metrics are not helpful, but you can change them by adding a layer of knowledge to them that make them your own. And the second idea is too many metrics become overwhelming and an excuse to, but if you have an existential conversation inside about what things do you value, it's very easy to create indexes of different data so that then you have something that's one number that people can agree on. If they want to reopen that argument a year later, fine. and all the detailed metrics are in there. It's not like you've lost page views. But data by itself is meaningless. You know,
Right.
In all the years I've been doing this, data is indicative of something. It's never definitive. It points you in a direction, and these are tools for editors rather than things that take away their initiative.
Great observations, and I think I will add to that by saying there's also, I think, 2 main types of journalism metrics. One are what I would say these sort of site-wide metrics, total lists, the trends, changes, and things like that overall for the site. And those are the ones that can be used for longer-term strategic planning and reporting and what have you. The type of metrics that I addressed here today are that story-by-story level metrics. And the story-by-story metrics don't necessarily neatly roll up into these overall trends and things like that you see in all the industry reports and what have you. Overall, for an organization, you have to have a handle on both. And most of the time in the past has been spent on those overall site metrics. Most of my work in analytics has also been spent on sort of the overall trends and things like that. But now it's time, again, to sort of really look at it from the individual journalist level. What are the day-to-day metrics in this long haul in doing our work, in building our businesses, and helping them to survive and being an integral part of it? Day to day, for every single person in the newsroom, what is their role? What are those tools that an individual needs to do their work better? So I think in this, all of the metrics that are out there, I think it's useful. And metrics are useless unless they are used. It's useful, I think, to really divide up sort of, if you're a manager and editor, you use these set of metrics. If you're the individual journalist, you use another. So there are all kinds of tools out there. The question, the biggest thing about a tool, the biggest thing about anything having to do with analytics is to use them. Not just look at a report, but actually use them, use it to make decisions, use it to provide insight for information that you need every day that you do your job.
So how do you get reporters and editors who might be daunted by these metrics, a little bit standoffish, how do you really, I guess, what would you say to someone who, wanted to engage them in that and, kind of get them started down this path?
I think the best thing is to listen and to really understand the individual and where they're coming from as far as their mindset and their fear. What is it that they fear? What is it that they don't understand? What is it that they think is not fair? And to really understand first what are the barriers that they see to really using this. Sometimes it is just a technical issue. Sometimes it is that they just don't believe in it. So as with anything that you work with any child that you have, not to beat this metaphor to death, but as with any child, it's really looking at the individual first and seeing what really needs to be addressed, what's going to be the most important to that person, I think. So I think it sits down and really having a conversation with individuals as opposed to coming down from on high and slamming people with a bunch of you must do this, or we have to do this, or it has to be this way.
Dana, I'm Peter Bale from the Centre for Public Integrity. I really admire your generous approach there, because sometimes people just have to get with the program quickly, I think. Because there is tremendous pressure in this area. I don't know whether there's anybody in here who gives money to non-profits like mine, but it is still an incredibly competitive area. And I just want to give you there's nobody from my team here, but let me give you an example, which I'd like your advice on, if you like, about this area of how you equate impact. We've just spent, I think, nearly 6 months on a story about the EPA and its Civil Rights Office and its total failure to stand up for the civil rights of people facing what's called environmental racism. Now, that story, I don't even want to estimate what the cost of it was, and my team is desperate not to get into a sort of value for money exercise, but there has to be one there. Now, that story was read, it was probably published from our point of view at the wrong time, because we published it while Congress was shut, but the EPA has since then changed its policies and announced a major review of its civil rights thing. So we could say there's impact, but then to our funders, so in terms of, in this non-profit world, you have what's called a theory of change. So we've delivered the change that our funders were after, but the metrics that we will be judged by was distribution and impact, and it was remarkably small. So there's a difficult trade-off here, it's very nice, but we do need some sort of value in kind formula to be able to put to people and say, in the absence of page views, this is what we've been able to give you.
The funders are working on this. The Media Impact Project has been doing a number of projects with the Media Impact Funders group, which many of whom are here at ONA and are meeting tomorrow. The Media Impact Funders organization, Jessica Clark is the research director of that, and she co-wrote the guide that the Media Impact Project has, which it's available in the Midway, that is a two-sided book. One side has metrics for nonprofit news organizations, and the other side, you flip it over, and it has the issues and the metrics and the things that the funders really need to understand when they're funding journalism projects. So on the one side, the funders need to understand what the news organizations can do and what they do, and the news organizations need to understand where the funders are coming from. So that's the purpose of that book. That's the purpose of starting that conversation on what a funder needs and wants and what a news organization can do. So each has to understand both sides, and so what you as an individual can do is that when you're asked for that report from that funder, is to, yes, answer those metrics that they asked for, but add to it, add that complete story. Tell them, why these metrics don't tell, that they're asking for don't tell the complete story. But, this whole issue about media metrics, there's a lot of people working at it together, because it's not just going to be one individual saying, this or that. It's going to be all of us really, with all of our different projects, all of our different needs, all our different outcomes that we need to have. It's going to be all of us really trying to work this out together and agree on some type of sound that are out there. We're never going to get completely standardized. We're not going to go back to that mass media world where we had a nice, convenient one metric of circulation or TV ratings or things like that. We're inherently in a much more complex world because of the way people use information and people get information, and it's exciting, and it's evolving all the time. Every time Facebook changes something, all of the audience analysts go, oh my gosh, we've got to rechange everything we did about metrics kind of thing. So, but we should be excited by that because it means that people are getting to information in different ways. And so we all owe it, we all owe each other the time spent to understand each other, understand what we really need and what we really have and what we can really contribute to the knowledge of how people, what data is out there that really is going to tell, what is happening and what is impact. And at the same time, identifying what cannot be measured, kind of thing, and saying, yes, we still have to pursue that EPA story. It's not going to get these metrics that you're asking for, but this is what it is going to do. So, well, thank you for coming, and I hope you all go out and tell the complete story of your story.